All right, folks. So, like we said, this was a very, very bad week to have the Turning Points USA conference. But, Tucker Carlson just kind of leans into it. Figures, all right, if there's tension in the air, let's cut through that as quickly as we can. So, here, must listen. Tucker just went off on the Epstein cover-up and his connection to Israel on Turning Point. Absolute fire. So, yes, Tucker says the I word quite a bit in this little rant. And he does come as close as anyone in the magosphere has come to calling out Donald Trump directly for insisting that everybody shut up about this.
The question is not, was Jeffrey Epstein a weirdo who was abusing girls? Yes, we can answer that. The real question is, why was he doing this, on whose behalf, and where did the money come from? And those are the questions that need to be answered. And I think it's entirely fair to ask them. And it's not adequate to say anyone who asked them is somehow desecrating the memory of little girls who died in Texas. I'm not going to put up with that answer. I don't care who gives that answer.
Referring specifically to Donald Trump, who in the answer that he gave to the reporter says, you're still talking about Epstein when we're dealing with Texas and all this other stuff. So that's pretty clear what he's referencing there.
That is not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan?
Yeah, see, this is why the whole, Ghislaine trafficked people just to him, so that's why she's in jail, because the victims were going just to him. This whole thing makes no sense unless he was part of a broader network. It just makes no sense unless he's part of a broader network. His whole life trajectory makes no sense. The way in which this was done with an island and a plane that has all these famous people, logged as having gotten on, there just is no way this could not have been part of a broader conspiracy. All a conspiracy means is when two or more people get together and do something that they're not supposed to, and they try and get away with it. And this was clearly,
show.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, like this show. Or like Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. That's a conspiracy. There's two people right there. Now all you need is more, which clearly there were.
Well,
where did all the money come from?
Eric Weinstein actually posted something about this. I didn't want to drag out the segment, so I didn't use it, but it was actually kind of interesting. He made the point that, it's beyond Mossad, it's beyond any particular intelligence agency, that Jeffrey Epstein, if you look at the money involved, he was a front operation for a lot of different interests.
Oh, yeah. No, he didn't get like a W-2 from Mossad every year. It's not like he was an employee. No, he was the liaison between a lot of these different interests.
A lot of
course.
Yes.
And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed.
Big ovation at Turning Point USA. Charlie Kirk's a very pro-Israel guy. It's a pretty big ovation at the mention of Israel in that way.
That's naughty.
Is what I keep saying. MAGA is not.
Right.
MAGA is not. There are a lot of people in their leadership who are probably in a position to get some moolah to have that position. The rank and file hate Israel. You've got your fanatics, but most of them are sitting in front of a mic. Most of them are professionals, man. If you're talking about the average person, they fucking hate Israel. That's why you get an ovation like that.
Into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting U.S. president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person. It makes you a citizen. You're allowed to do that because you're not a slave. You're a citizen.
Oh, well, tell that to your friend there. Tell that to your friends at the Justice Department. Tell that to the President of the United States, because he certainly doesn't view us that way. He certainly doesn't view us that way. And that's why, you know, as much as like this is kind of cathartic to hear, you kind of run out of patience with guys like Tucker who come out and make these arguments every once in a while. Okay, well, what about Mahmoud Khalil, who's now suing the United States government for false arrest and wrongful imprisonment for expressing an opinion that the government doesn't like? Now, he's not a natural-born citizen, but he's on a green card. He's a legal permanent resident.
Right.
Has every right to call this country his home, which means he's supposed to be protected by the First Amendment. But they're treating him more like a slave, much more like a slave.
And you have a right to expect that your government will not act against your interests, and you have a right to demand that foreign governments not be allowed to act against your interest. That's not creepy. It shouldn't be forbidden. And yet all of us have trained ourselves to believe that you can't say that somehow, that that's like too naughty and forbidden. And the effect of making that off limits has been to create a lot of resentment, and I'll say it, hate online, where people feel like they can't just say, like, what the hell is this? You have the former Israeli prime minister living in your house. You have had all this contact with the foreign government. Were you working on behalf of Mossad? Were you running a blackmail operation on behalf of foreign government? By the way, every single person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. I've never met anyone who doesn't think that.
Every person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. I've never met anyone who doesn't think that. He's lived in D.C. most of his life, as he just said. He's worked in media, Washington, his almost his whole life. He says he's never met a person in D.C. who doesn't think that. Yet Donald Trump tells you there are no files, there's no list. It was him and Ghislaine Maxwell fulfilling this fetish for
no, totally.
girls.
That's
all
how
was.
A math teacher without even a BA
he's a dropout,
winds up with an island.
Yeah.
Winds up with the largest private house in Manhattan. Winds up being a tax advisor to billionaires. Yeah, no, sure.
Yep.
That tracks.
I don't know any of them that hate Israel, but no one feels they can say that. Why? And I think the longer that we play along with it, the more subterranean and creepy and hateful the conversation actually becomes. So I think it's better just to say it right out loud. Did this happen? And of course, that question has been asked to the government of Israel, and their answer is, we're not going to tell you. And I think our answer should be, no. As long as we're sending you money, if you were committing crimes on our soil, we have an absolute right to know, did you do this or not?
Goes over very well. As you said, that audience clearly not a pro-Israel audience. And this is a compounding problem for the Republican Party, I would say, even broader than just MAGA, is now you have this issue, which has been, so core to the, argument of, conservatism and sort of the traditional average person versus the Davos lizard people, the godless hedonists, who like to partake in these kinds of things that Epstein did. Not only is that true, and then not only does that create a huge problem in and of itself, but now, of course, Tucker just stepping right on the other third rail of this, of course, which is the Israel connection. So now you have really two major issues driving a wedge through the conservative movement in a way that I think has repercussions beyond MAGA. I think it has repercussions even outside of the midterms or even 2028. Like, these kinds of issues, these kinds of events create crises of confidence in the system. And this is what we said going into Trump term 2. Okay, what happens when MAGA realizes they've been screwed? These people are not inclined to run into the arms of the liberals, but they're going to go somewhere. Do they just retreat crawl back into the woodwork they crawled out of when Trump came down the escalator? Because we know that Trump mobilized a lot of formerly apolitical people, or are they too red pilled now? Now they're hooked into the ecosystem. Now they're watching Jack Posobiec, they're watching Charlie Kirk, they're watching Alex Jones, and no matter what these clowns try and do, they're not going to be able to convince a sizable majority of their listenership that there's nothing to see here. That's not going to fly. That's obviously not going to fly. It's obviously not going to fly. And so what you're seeing here is a real splintering off of the conservative movement, I would say. I would say this is bigger than the MAGA movement at this point because it touches on Israel too. And, that's why I became interested in the Epstein case. I mean, I always thought it's interesting from like a true crime standpoint, right? I guess. And the lesson of which is if you're rich and powerful, you get away with crimes that ordinary people couldn't. Okay, nothing I didn't know going in. What made me more interested in this is when I found out that, yes, he is almost certainly an intelligence asset, because that makes this a political story with implications that at this moment are unknowable and maybe unknowable forever because you just don't know how broad they are, right? You can't know what you don't know. But yeah, no, this is going to be a nightmare for them. And good, they earned it. They deserved it. They deserved it. They poured fuel. They poured gasoline on this culture war fire for many, many years. They created a lot of antagonism. They created a lot of ill will about people whose lives they knew nothing about. And now it's coming to bite them in the ass. And so that's great.
Yeah, the problem they're having is that their base is a lot less inclined to bend the knee than the Democrats' base. The Democrats is very much, I mean, up until maybe now, we'll see how things go going forward. The libs are hall monitors. It's a party of hall monitors. It's a party of people who really wanted to be liked by their teachers in school. And people like that, they'll pretty much go along with anything. And the MAGA base is not like that. And part of the reason is because they're less likely to have something to lose.
Right.
There is no more conformist group of people than middle and upper middle class people. They have just enough to have something to lose and not enough to be able to piss off the establishment without losing what they have. You got them exactly where you want them. They are the most invested in the system of any segment of society. This working class base that moved over into the Republican Party, particularly with the advent of Donald Trump, man, a lot of these people have hard luck stories, man. Like they're not invested in propping up a politician that way. We've had a lot of, in terms of what this is going to do with people who got politically activated by this. We have a lot of MAGA viewers who will drop into our comments section, particularly after this blew up, saying, I'm never voting for anyone again.
Right.
Like they're not going to run out and get behind the party of Kamala Harris. Like the party would have to drastically change. Now, I know we'll get into this a little bit more in the Mamdani segment. There's a lot of debate right now around what Mamdani's victory means for people on the left and what it doesn't mean, and getting sheepdogged into the Democratic Party and whether you should resist that and fight against it. We'll talk about that. But the fact is, Bernie Sanders killed it in front of a Fox News audience, in spite of what these really disdainful of workers, leaders of the party that we've had really since the Clintons, projected the old new left. I mean, the hippies hated the old New Deal workers that dominated the Democratic Party. The Clintons were these new college educated, privileged enough to be more concerned with identity than labor rights version of the left that emerged in the 60s and 70s. The Clintons were that left taking over the establishment, and we've been paying for it ever since. Now, if you start to turn the party back into a party of workers, we know from the reaction that Sanders got that, yeah, man, like you could possibly win that group back over, but you would really really have to purge Clintonism from the party entirely. Like the Pelosi's, they'd all have to go. The Schumers, that whole thing would have to go.
Please clap.